My dear friend, this is the third Sunday of Lent. The first reading comes from the book of Exodus, chapter 1, chapter 3, verses 1 to 8, 13 to 15. The second reading comes from the book of Second Corinthians, chapter 10, verse 1 to 6, 10 to 12. And the gospel comes from the book of Luke, chapter 13, verses 1 to 9. My dear friend, the first reading is the story of Moses, that you all know how God miraculously helped Moses to even walk from Egypt, where he had killed one of the Egyptians, to save his kinsmen, the Israelites. And he had to go as an immigrant to the wilderness and tend his uncle's sheep, Jethro. It is when he was shepherding that God called him in the burning bush. And that was an encounter, that a special encounter that Moses had with God. That encounter, when he was in his low moments, when he had lost hope, and actually would say that he had no destiny as a person, God gives him some work to do, and God gives him a destiny, and God gives him a purpose to live. This is seen in the Great Commission that God gives Moses. In the gospel today, we see also some people approaching Jesus, and they are asking him whether it was the fault of the Galileans who were killed by the Roman Empire and mixed their blood with soil, whether they were sinners. But Jesus answers them with another story of those who died on the tower, whether those who were died on the tower were better, were more sinners than those who survived. My dear friend, this is one of the fundamental questions that we ask in life. Like, you're traveling in the same bus and there's an accident, you survive, and a friend of yours gets some multiple fractures or dies. Does it mean that that person is more a sinner than you? I have encountered people in my ministry who, most of them ask me, because of the suffering that they are going through, does God love me? 3 years ago, we had an experience in a parish I was assisting where we lost around 30 of our choir members. In fact, one of our choir in that parish church was wiped by raging waters of a river. They were trying to cross a river. And when went to say mass for the Christians, one of the fundamental questions that were asking me is, Father, what wrong have we done as a church to God to punish us this much? Why does God allow this to happen? Yet these choir members were going to do his work, actually to sing for his people. These are some of the questions that we ask. In fact, that particular day, there are other people who are going, even to a more to do a sinful act, and they traveled that particular day and did not die. Those ones who are going for a mission died. Why does God allow that? Not once or twice I visit families, and especially when they have a sick person. And one of the family was asking, my father, why is God allowing our dad to be sick? And he is our only breadwinner. Does God love us? Many times, when we face difficulties, we may ask, why is God allowing this difficulty to come to me and not to another person? My dear friends, today Jesus wants us to change our attitude and the way we perceive issues of suffering. Suffering does not come to us because we are bad, but suffering comes to us because at times God loves us. It may be a way of encountering God. It is in his suffering that Moses encountered God. In fact, we have seen many people, even Elijah, when he was suffering and he was almost dying, is when God came to his rescue. So sometimes suffering can be a moment when God wants also us to meet him in the suffering. What we need as Christians in this Lenten period is a change of attitude, a metanoia, a change of the way we see things. In fact, Bishop Robert Barron once said that Christianity is a way of seeing everything with Christian eyes and having a transformation of our vision. In fact, he says it's a metanoia, a transformation of vision. For example, a change in the way we see things. For example, Enchith Encha is another of an international bestseller called The Choice. Although she does not use the word metanoia, but it's actually about change of vision. In 1944, Edith Enker was one of the 10,000 Jewish people who were routed by the Nazis. You remember that story of the Holocaust. She was sent to Auschwitz, her hometown, and it is here where she wrote this book, The Choice. She survived the Holocaust and eventually she migrated to United States and went to become a psychologist. She has met many survivors of the Nazi concentration camps, and she makes this observation that all the survivors she met had one thing in common with her, that we have no control over the most consuming facts of our lives, but we have power to determine how we experience life after the trauma. This insight explains the title of her book, The Choice. The survivors had a choice, either to live by the traumatic experiences of the extermination of the Jews and the Holocaust, or to move on with their lives. You can live in the prison of the past, or you can let the past be a springboard that helps you to reach the life you want. My dear friends, you can live in the prison, but you can also make a choice to be free. Encha reflects that in her life, she has specialized in trauma counseling because she wants to help people to move from the past and to embrace the future, to change the way they think. And that this is what Jesus wants us to change the way we think and we approach our suffering. Here is another story about an author called Stephen Covey, that author of the great, most acclaimed book called The 7 Habits of the Highly Effective People. He tells a story of an occasion he went to give a talk, a public lecture, and it so happened that his mother was among the audience. But now, right in front of her mother, were two women, one of whom was chatting to her companion during the entire lecture. And Covey ignored this distraction, but he noticed that his mother was sitting not far from behind the women and becoming agitated. In fact, she said that she almost threw her handbag over their head. Thankfully, she did not. So, after the lecture, the mother approached the organizer of the lecture and she complained and said, "Did you see those women who were chatting and distracting everyone when my son was giving the lecture?" But now the organizer said, "Yes, yes, I saw them. But madam, that woman," and she pointed at one woman, "that woman is a Korean. She cannot understand English." So the other woman was translating for her. That is why the other woman had to listen very keenly and then translate to the Korean. After a week, there was another lecture, and the two women were still there. But this time, the mother of Stephen Covey was very kind to the women because she understood. She changed her thinking and the choice, and she changed how she saw the situation. My dear friends, when we suffer, many times, if we are not careful enough, we may find ourselves doing the wrong thing. But it is in suffering and in patience that we can experience God's loving action. Another example, my dear friend, is the story is told, and not even a story actually, is the theory of the expanding universe. It was first proposed by a Belgian priest called Georges Lemaitre. He was a mathematician and an astronomer and a physicist at Louvain University. He first he had to identify that there are some galaxies that are changing their color, their light, and he called them the recession of nearby galaxies. And he came up with a theory that maybe the universe is expanding. One of the implications of the expanding universe was traced back that if the universe is expanding, then Lemaitre said there must be a single point from where the universe originated. So Lemaitre called it the hypothesis of the primeval atom, but it was later given the name of the Big Bang. So ever since, the Big Bang has been a scientific theory of the origin of the universe. But now Albert Einstein let Lemaitre know that he did not like this idea of the primeval atom hypothesis, and he said it suggests too much the idea of creation. It's just like the theological idea of creation. From the point of view of physics, that theory, Einstein said, cannot be believed. Because according to Einstein, the whole universe remained the way it is, immutable forever. It never changed. But Einstein's first cosmological model, published in 1918, was spherical and perfectly about a static universe. However, an American astronomer called Edwin Hubble was working on Mount Wilson Observatory near Pasaneva, provided evidence that the universe was expanding. So what Hubble observed was that there is a red shift. So what does the red shift mean? He says if a source of light is moving away from us, the wavelength will appear to increase, and the increase of the wavelength means that the light becomes reddish. And he says, since some of the universe they are trying to observe, their light is becoming reddish, then this universe must be expanding. And he called it the theory of the red shift. Einstein visited Mount Wilson Observatory in 1931. After observing what Edwin Hubble had discovered, Einstein eventually admitted that the redshift of distant nebula has smashed my old construction like a hammer blow. The indisputable evidence before him now forced him to see that the universe differently. My dear friend, we need to start seeing life differently. If you go through suffering, my dear friend, don't take it as if God is punishing you. Today, the third Sunday of Lent, Jesus is telling us to change our metanoia on the way we approach and see suffering that comes to us. Jesus gives also another story of the fig tree, that the farmer had planted and he was not giving fruits. He wanted to remove and uproot the tree, but the farmer, the worker said, "Let me prune it. Let me put some manure and wait. Maybe if I plant and water it for 1 year, maybe it may produce some fruits." Patience. What is that telling us? The farmer is God, and the worker, the person working at the Shambaman is Jesus. And what Jesus is saying, he has come to save human beings, even to protect them from the wrath of God. And what he says is that God has patience with us. God is always patient with me. God is always patient with you. Are you like a fig tree that is not bearing fruit? God has patience with you, but that patience is not forever. It's for a period of time, because the fig tree was given 1 year. What time have you given yourself? This time of Lent is a time to change, my dear friend. We must produce good fruits. Fruits are our actions. We must produce good fruits. And this time of Lent is a time that God is watering us with all the activities of Lent. In fact, we are running a Lenten pilgrimage where every day we have an activity. Like yesterday, it was about forgiveness, how we can forgive each other during this time of Lent. And you want to produce good fruit, you have to take this journey of Lent to be a time of watering and manuring, so that you can change our ways and produce good fruits. And to produce these good fruits, we have to make a choice to change our attitudes towards God. Who is God for you? Is it a God who avenges for our actions, or is a loving God who, even in times of difficulties, is there with us? The God I worship, my dear friend, is a God who loves me, who loves you. Even when we are going through suffering, God is standing there next to you. Even when you think that God has abandoned you, in fact, that time is when God is more near, is nearer to you, when you think he has abandoned you because of your suffering. My dear friend, we don't go through suffering because we are sinners. It is part of God's plan. So when you go through some dark moments, accept it as God's plan. Do it with joy. Don't go there with bitterness, with resentment, with anger, and all that. Grudges, my dear friend, don't carry grudges when the suffering comes your way. It can also be a time where you encounter God. God encountered his people mostly when they were in the universe, the wilderness, when they were suffering. Be like the bush that Moses is experienced this today. The bush was burning, but it was not consumed. Can you be burnt by your sufferings? Can you be burnt by your challenges? But do not allow that suffering to consume you, my dear friend. This guy called Viktor Frankl is a great man, a psychologist, has written a lot of books. He said, to live is to suffer, and to survive is to find meaning in the suffering. May God help us to endure our suffering this Lenten period. Thank you.